Welcome to Irresistible You, Ignite Your Passion and Purpose. I am your host, Karen Seltz, also known as the Uncensored Self-Love Coach. In this episode, we are going to talk about how to lower the volume of the inner critic. If you're anything like me, you've had this voice in your head saying, you're not good enough. You could never be good enough. You can't do that. You're going to wear that. You're going to go out looking like that. Don't say that. You're going to look stupid. And the list goes on and on and on. So if you can relate to any of that, stick with me because we are going to conquer that. We are going to learn how to lower that volume and raise the volume of the voice of spirit or your highest self. So if that sounds good, stick with me. If you are new to me, there are really only three things that you need to know. The first thing is that if you have a deeper calling and you know that you are meant for more in this life and there's been something holding you back, whether it's the voice of the inner critic or what you care, if you care about what other people think, anything like that, just know I have been in your shoes and I am on the journey with you. And I am happy to share with you what has worked for me along my path. The second thing that you need to know is I consider myself to be a divine mirror. Now, what I mean by that is I am able to see people through the eyes of spirit and reflect that back to them, this beautiful, perfect, powerful version of them until they really get it for themselves. And they're like, oh my gosh, now I finally see it. And then they stop dimming their light. So if you can relate to that, you are in the right place. The third thing that you need to know about me is that I am uncensored in my approach. I am willing to say whatever I am called to say, do whatever I'm called to do, and go wherever I am called to go to get you to the breakthrough that you are ready for in this very moment. Yes, so let's dive in. So along my journey, I have studied what I call ego. And by that, I don't mean the psychological id, ego, superego. What I mean by that is the spiritual ego. And by that, I mean, it's the part of us that wants us to feel separate from our highest selves, separate from one another, separate from God, universe, source, spirit, whatever you choose to call it. So there are so many different tactics that the ego uses in order to keep us down, in order to keep us under its control, so to speak. And one of those is that voice of the inner critic. So we're going to dive into that. And we're going to talk about several of the different aspects of the ego. So the first thing that I really want you to know is that the ego speaks first and speaks loudest. So when we're in any situation, the first voice we often hear is the loud one screaming at us. That's the voice of the ego. It'll say like, stop, you're going to look stupid. Don't say that. Close your mouth. Swallow your words. You want to protect yourself. That voice is the voice of the ego. So what do? When we get into those situations where that voice is screaming at us, it's like, ah, and we can't hear above the din, above the noise. It is really a great idea to separate yourself from any outside noise because we got enough going on in here. We got enough noise, right? So go somewhere else. One of the things that I often say to my clients is your highest self or spirit, God, universe, source is only 3 breaths away. So what I generally do when I am in these situations where I can't hear the voice of spirit, I will go somewhere quiet and I will close my eyes and I will take 3 slow, intentional, mindful breaths. Now that can look however you want it to look. You can just say in your head, like, okay, I'm slowing down my breath. You can say a prayer. Often what I say when I'm working with clients is get me out of the way and speak through me. and I breathe that in and out. And then I become a conduit for spirit, universe, source in that moment. But in these times when we are so confused, I love this saying, the ego uses the illusion of confusion. Confusion is a racket. It's not real. So we have all these things coming at us like, and we get confused, or we pretend we're confused so that we don't need to make a decision, so that we don't fail. Because if we don't make a decision, a lot of times our back door is that, oh, I can't fail if I don't choose, if I don't say anything, if I just pretend to be confused. And oftentimes I believed that I was confused. I 100% believed it. I was co-signing that story. So the ego will use that. So when we get quiet, we can invite spirit in, and you can do that however works for you. I'm not attached at all to what you call it. You can say higher self. You can say spaghetti monster in the sky, Holy Spirit, spirit, source, divine, God, Jesus, Mary, Kuan Yin, Buddha. Let's cover them all. And you can just say, whatever it is, spirit, calm my mind, calm my mind. What would you have me know? What would you have me know? And you do that and do your 3 slow, deep, mindful breaths. I do this often with clients too, so we can synchronize our energy. So it helps us to really transition from one state to another state. And once you practice this, it becomes like that. You can switch states so that you're not, you don't hear all the noise. So the first tip really for lowering that volume is to separate yourself. If you can, go somewhere else where you're by yourself and there's no noise at all, external noise, and take 3 slow, deep breaths. And while you're doing that, if you'd like to set an intention or say a prayer, you may do so. And you're becoming mindful. You're becoming present in the present moment when you do that. So I love that. I love 3 slow, deep breaths. Spirit is always 3 deep breaths away, 3 breaths away. All right, so that's great. So that's my first tip on this. So another thing that the ego loves to use is comparison. And there's a saying, comparison is the thief of joy. Now, my favorite example of this is I'll see a pretty woman, and she's like skinny and hot, and guys are like falling all over her. And I'll be like, in my head, like, I don't say this out loud, I don't want everyone to know my crazy. Like, man, she's got a much better body than I do, but I am so much smarter. So I'm comparing myself, making myself worse than her in my looks, but better than her in my intelligence. It doesn't matter. Any comparison at all, better than, worse than, is the ego, 100%. So when you can look at anybody and say, that's me, I cannot see anything outside of me. That person is a reflection of me. The things I like about myself, the things I don't like about myself, I'm looking in a mirror every time I look at another human being. That is humbling in so many ways. Think about, you walk down the street, you see a homeless person talking to themselves. How is that you? It's fun to play with, and it's a challenge for some of us to say, how is that me? Because we all have every single characteristic inside of us. So whatever we see out there is really in here. There is nothing out there. There's nothing out there. All right, so one of my favorite things, when people get stuck, they get stuck in this black and white thinking. And when we're under stress, we often go back to whatever our old patterns were. Like, I can either do choice A or choice B. There are no other options. I don't care what you say. There's only 2 options. That 100% is the ego mind talking. 100%. It's black or white. It's right or wrong. It's up or down. It's left or right. That's the ego. When you invite in one more possibility, so a third possibility, you are inviting spirit in and you are recognizing that there are infinite possibilities in the universe. So just by inviting in one more, okay, well, what else is possible? What else could happen? What else is a possibility? That's a great question to ask yourself. What else is possible? What else is possible? So the second that you do that, you are inviting your higher self, your source, spirit, God in to make the decisions with you, to open your eyes, to take off the blinders, to see what else is possible. Because when we are thinking with a limited mind, seeing only two possibilities, 100%, that is the ego coming in, doing its tricks, trying to make you feel separate, which is false. Now talk about confusion. There's some confusion. So that's another thing that we're doing. One thing that I love about this work is checking in with my body. Now, when we're thinking with the ego mind, which is that limited part of ourselves, the body will tell you. So it might feel constricted. You might feel pain like, oh my gosh, my neck hurts, my shoulders hurt, my jaw's clenched, my stomach is nauseous, it's tight, my throat is tight. Just check in with your body and see what it feels like. If it feels contracted or in pain at all, you'll know that that is the ego creeping in. Whereas when you're thinking with spirit, there's an opening that takes place. You feel centered, you feel rooted down and rooted up. Your heart might feel open, your stomach feels nice, it feels open. Everything's open. And the breath is a brilliant, I call it a lie detector. It's like, if I'm breathing, then I'm definitely in spirit. I'm thinking with my higher self. If I'm breathing shallow and rapid, then I'm in some type of anxiety, which means I'm not present and I'm thinking with the ego mind. So again, when you notice your body doing that, just first say, yes, I noticed it. And you get to celebrate. Every time you notice that you're doing some of these ego patterns, you get to celebrate it. Because before you became aware of this, you were doing them unconsciously all the time. So the first step to changing any behavior is really noticing that you're doing it. And then you can invite in some other possibilities. So when you notice your breathing is shallow or rapid, or you notice your body's contracted, you can do the 3 breaths. Okay, 3 slow, deep, mindful breaths. And think about expansion, think about connection, because there is no separation. Separation is an illusion. It is 100%. All right, another way to know that you're thinking with the ego mind is your energy level. If you are tired, if you are bored, that's the ego. So you get to think about, okay, what would light me up? What would light me up? What would make me passionate? What would make me energetic? If I use this as an example sometimes, like if somebody came to your door with that $1 million check, would you be tired anymore? Would you be bored? Would your body hurt? Would it feel contracted? Heck no. No, you'd be like, woohoo, I'm a millionaire, right? So think about, what is it, that thing, maybe it's a person that you love that you haven't seen in a long time that shows up at your door and surprises you. Maybe it's some brilliant piece of news. Maybe it's a new puppy, like whatever it is that lights you up. Think about that. And that's, if you want to use comparison, compare it to that and say, how do I get there? What do I get to do to be in that state of passion? Because that is what's available to you. And when you are passionate, guess what's quieter? That voice of the inner critic. It's much quieter. It can't talk above passion. It really can't. So that's another place to look, like what lights you up, and do those things. I have a list. I call it my list of where I experience the love of God or where I experience flow. Either one works, because if at any moment I'm feeling like crap, I'm beating myself up, I'm filled with self-doubt, I think I'm not a good person, I think I can't do it, I think other people are better than me, whatever the crap is that goes on in the head, in the mind, because we all have it. I can pull out my list at any moment and say, okay, where do I experience the love of God? And I can look, I'm like, oh, drop into my heart and ask, like, who gets to hear from me right now? Who's sitting in a pile of self-pity, or who could use some encouragement right now? And I just trust the first person that comes to my heart and mind. I just call them, say, hey, I was just sitting around and I was just thinking, like, who could I serve right now? Who gets to hear from me? And you popped into my mind. So I'm just reaching out and I want to see how you're doing. And inevitably the person's like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you called. I was like in this crap, this stinking thinking, and I couldn't get out. And this is perfect. And by me serving and getting out of my own stinking thinking and serving another person, they rise, I rise, we both rise. And that's how it works. Because that for me is generosity. Being able to really drop in and serve without expecting anything back. And then also, if I allow somebody else to pour into me, if I'm in a bad place, I have a very low tolerance now for that level of discomfort, like where I'm beating myself up or sitting in, I call it a shitty diaper, like sitting in my shitty diaper, like feeling sorry for myself, or in a pity party. I call somebody up and say, hey man, I'm sitting in a shitty diaper. Can you support me? And by me requesting support from somebody, I see that as generosity. I allow that person to pour into me and to make me feel better, to remind me of the truth of who I am. And they get to feel good about themselves. And it fills their cup. And I'm telling myself, like, you know what? You matter. You matter enough to request support. And somebody wants to support you because you're worthy and you're lovable and you deserve it. So it's an interesting take on generosity. A lot of us don't grow up with that notion. We think if we ask for something, we need to give something back. And that makes it a transaction. And it takes all the good feelings out of it. It's like, okay, I'll help you, but you give me $20. It's like, it would be a crappy friendship. Like, I would not want that friend, right? So I offer service, wanting nothing in return. And I also, when I want it, I request support. And I do it frequently now. That's like a newer habit for me. Before I thought like, oh, I have to give and give and give. That's generous. But then I was empty and I was resentful when people didn't ask me if I needed anything. But I realized I got to use my voice. I get to speak up and say, hey, can you support me? I'm sitting in a shitty diaper. Help me out of it. It's not comfortable anymore. So back to lowering the voice of the inner critic. I discovered this a while ago, not that long ago actually, but it's super fun. Do you remember as kids skipping, like, I don't know if I have enough space, but skipping. When we skip and say a mantra, I am powerful, I am loving, I am courageous, I am passionate, whatever it is, there's something that happens physiologically in our brains and in our bodies, but it wires it in. And everybody I've done this with, and now I have maybe a sample size of 10 or 12, so not that many, but everybody starts giggling because it's so silly. It reminds us of when we were kids and carefree, and it wires it in to our brain and our body, and it gets us out of a rut. So if we're stuck in this inner critic thinking, move the body somehow. You might have a dance party, you might skip and say a mantra, but move your body. Get outside, take a walk, do something. Because when you sit in that stinking thinking, you cannot get out of it quickly. It's going to require some kind of interruption to that thought. So interrupt it yourself. Interrupt the pattern, like, oh my gosh, I'm stuck in this loop. And it will loop 100%, because the thought produces chemicals that fire certain emotions. And then the emotions signal to the brain, oh, make more of these chemicals that will reinforce the whatever you're feeling, victim or feeling sorry for yourself or anger, whatever it is, which produces corresponding thoughts, which produces corresponding emotions. So it's a loop. So in order to get out of that loop, you get to move the body, move it, move it, move it, dance, shake it out, put on your favorite dance song, bang your head. I don't know, do something, skip, move the body, have some fun, laugh. All right, so we're lowering the volume of the inner critic. There are so many different ways. You guys, I have this handout that I put together for some coaching clients back, I don't know, a year or two ago on the ego versus spirit. If you want it, just message me, or you can, you can message me on Facebook. Just look up Karen Seltz, message me on Facebook Messenger, and I will get you this handout. Or you can email me at Karen Seltz, which is my name, the number 9 at gmail.com. And I'll send you this handout. And it's really super helpful. It's like, okay, this is the ego and this is spirit. And then you can know what to look for because it's long. I mean, I just went through it one day. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so long. These are all tricks the ego uses and what the opposite is. So one of my favorites is when I catch myself needing to be right and like insisting that I'm right. I'm like, I will prove it and I will fight you to the death because I know I'm right. Then that for sure, 100% is the ego. And I don't know if anybody can relate to that. Anyone? So one of my principles that I go back to is practice being wrong. Because the second I know that I'm right, I've cut off any other possibilities. I don't see or hear anything else. I am seeking only evidence that I'm right, and I'm not open to anything else. So for me, that closes off everything. And I live by curiosity. I want to be curious. I want to be connected to people. And how can I connect to people if I'm right? Because the second I think I'm right, I'm assuming that they are wrong, which is not a good way to be in any relationship, in my opinion. Not the way I want to roll anyways. So let's see. Oh, ego. Let's talk about this. Anytime we feel the need to protect ourselves, we're hiding, we're shrinking, we're dimming our light. We're not using our gifts. We're not owning our gifts. That is not humility. Humility, I heard this definition in 12-step recovery. Humility is owning your gifts and being willing to share them, not pretending you don't have them. Being humble doesn't mean like, oh no, no, don't say that. I'm not that smart. No, I'm not that talented. No, that's bullshit. And that is not humility. That's false humility. That's like, oh no, please don't say that I'm intelligent. Please don't say I'm pretty. Please, whatever. It's crap. So owning your gifts and not shrinking, saying, yes, I am powerful. Yes, I can sing. Yes, I can dance. Yes, I can make a difference for you. I know that I can. And being that firm, having that knowing deep inside with conviction, having that faith. And we all are going to have these moments of fear and doubt creep in. That's where courage comes in. I love practicing courage because without it, we're going to stay in this tiny little comfort zone. And everything that we want is outside of it. Everything we have is here, and everything we want is outside of that comfort zone. And the only way to get out there is to be uncomfortable. We're going to have to do things that we are afraid of, things that scare the crap out of us. And we get to do them. We can do them with support. We can request support from other people like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared to do this. Will you hold my hand? Or will you, can I call you before I do it and after and say, I did it. And we get to be proud of ourselves every time we take a courageous step. Every time we do something that scares the crap out of us, we get to be so proud of ourselves. And we get to pat ourselves on the back and say, good job, Karen. You rocked it. You were a badass today. And I love this. I've been submitting applications for TEDx talks, and several of them required a video, and I put it off for, I don't know, weeks and weeks. And finally, my deadline was coming up that I had set for myself. And I'm like, okay, it's now or never. I want to be a speaker. Why am I afraid to do this 2-minute video? So I finally just got out of the way and said, I don't care if it's perfect. It gets to be messy. It gets to be me, and it gets to be done and submitted. So I did that, and I haven't watched it yet, but I feel so good. I feel good that I did it, that I was willing to be uncomfortable, willing to be seen so imperfectly and say, you know what, this is where I am right now. And I am here to serve. I am here to share my story. I am here to shed light on some major subjects that not many people in this country talk about. And it took a ton of courage for me to do this and then hit the submit button. And I did it. And I celebrated. I'm like, yes, I did it. Woohoo. So it doesn't matter where you are. There are still going to be things that scare you. I speak all the time on lives and things, but speaking in a different way, speaking in front of a live audience that's right in front of me, that would be scary for me right now because I haven't done it in a long time because of COVID. So there's always a next cut. What's yours? What's yours? What are you going to do that scares you? Oh, let's have some fun. I would love to support you. And I have a way to do that. Because oftentimes the people that come to me, the women that come to me for coaching are women that are tired of playing small. They have this deeper calling inside, and it is like knock, knock, knocking at the door. And they're like, I can't run from it anymore. A lot of times they're recovering perfectionists. They have the voice of the inner critic saying, you can't do this, you can't do that. But then they have the other voice saying, you must, it's time. The world needs you. And that's where I come in. So I have opened up next week 5 spots on my calendar to talk to you, to offer you a possibilities call. And on this call, we're going to open up possibilities that you haven't seen before. Now, this call is free. It's 45 minutes. And all you need to do is just go to, let's see, what is it called? Connect with Karen. Connectwithkaren.us. There's some imperfection for you. How fun. Connectwithkaren.us. It'll take you to my personal calendar. You just hit book a call. It'll ask you a couple of questions and you'll choose from several times available. We'll hop on the phone within the next few days. And we're going to talk about what it is that you really want and what's been holding you back. And we're going to get deep into your why. Like, why is that important to you? Why? Because without the why, we won't do the courageous thing unless we know why we're doing it. So we get to be deeply rooted in our why. So I'd love to offer that to you. And the reason I'm offering that is because for years, like 20 years, I'm not kidding, I stayed stuck. I stayed stuck in self-doubt. I stayed safe. I played small. I hid from my calling. I ran and I suffered. I suffered from clinical depression. I became an addict. I was suicidal. I didn't think I had anything to offer anybody. And I believed that story and it was crap. And it took a lot of work to get where I am here. And I would love to shorten that distance for you. So if I'm talking to you, just go to connectwithkaren.us and let's hop on a call. Let's get on a possibilities call and open it up for you. I hope this episode was helpful for you. If it was, share it with your friends and let me know what your takeaways are. Thank you so much for watching.